Welcome back, and today we are going to be flying out the SU-25BM. And you might think, what is it like to fly this thing? Let me tell you, it feels probably the same way as George Russell over there is feeling in his F-16. He's not doing very great, and someone turned into him. He lost both of his wheels, and he's now blaming everyone on the grid except himself. And that's a bit what the SU-25 is like. When you do get lucky, you might get a few kills in, but all in all, the kit is alright. The R-73s, which are definitely the main selling point of this thing, as well as the absolutely busted damage model that you are seeing on the screen right now. I just sponged a Phoenix, and I'm gonna be flying around like nothing even happened. The R-73 definitely gets the spotlight, because there are some people that are afraid of it, thinking that it shouldn't be added, and right now, as they are, I think they are alright. The R-73 feels a bit like an AIM-9L. I do think that these are superior to the AIM-9L. They are a little bit more flare resilient, but it's more in the sense that it feels more RNG. Sometimes it just goes straight through, even in a head-on. It doesn't even matter. Other times you will get one flat like usual business. Again, we sponge a Phoenix across the map. The first frame that you saw of that clip is me tabbing in, and I instantly saw the missile, and by the time I saw it I was too late. I shouldn't have AFK climbed in, but that's just how it is. The R60 MKs have a nice little double feature as serving as APS. Shoot a missile out of the air, this guy thinks we are dead. Unfortunately for him we are not. We then RTB and obviously land and repair. Here's a MiG-23 coming head on. We shoot a missile at him, he shoots a missile at us. But look at the R-73, it kind of loses lock, and then it reacquires it, and it slams him right out of the air, because the missile that he shot at us actually ran out of fuel. The heat signature disappeared, and the R-73 simply reacquired lock. That is something you don't see very often, and something that is actually pretty handy. From behind, these missiles are pretty deadly if you don't turn your afterburner off. They are pretty flare hungry, not over excessive, I think it's pretty fair, but they have a little bit of IRCM. But in general, the missiles don't feel that game breaking. They are good, do not get me wrong, especially like shots like this. The range of them is very, very strong. But the main issue is going to be the airframe, like you are expecting it to be. As you can see, after you've taken off, you can pitch up quite quickly and shoot the R-73 at about 10 meters above the ground. And then they will ignore the flares for the most part. But in all seriousness, the airframe is the main limitation, and the real reason for this is not because the performance is absolutely garbage. I mean, it is, and it is an issue, but the main real issue here is that you are so slow that by the time you reach the middle of the battlefield, the game has basically been decided. If you want to go for ground units, if you want to go for bombing points, like you should be able to in this thing, you are still going to be too late. Your team will either bomb everything before you get there, because again, you are so damn slow. You rip at about Mach 0.83, which is not exceptionally high. And if you want to go for ground units, you need to bring a heavier loadout. And by the time you reach the middle of the battlefield, guess what? The game has been decided already, either by your team progressing into a massive fireball, or the enemy team progressing into also a massive fireball. Either end of the spectrum here doesn't really get you anything. Actually, best case scenario most of the time is that your team sucks absolute balls, and then you are able to actually go head on with 12 people at once. Not very uncommon, as you will see throughout the rest of the gameplay. The range here of these missiles is pretty damn good. Do keep in mind that the missiles are still kind of bugged, and the main real issue here is that they start wiggling. And because they start wiggling so badly, they will actually lose a lot of their initial range, and it will kind of bite you in the ass. Going head on, however, with 223s and a 30mm in the nose, and I spread these gun pods out to just have more coverage in front of my nose, and if I even remotely aim at them, especially after real shatter, they're not gonna do too hot unless I set them on fire. And the MiG-23 MLD that you saw, that missile actually hit. You didn't actually see the kill feed or the hit feed or whatever you want to call it, because I was shooting at the F-14 going head on with us. But the R-73 is pretty damn reliable for an IR missile. I still think that the Python 3 is pretty close to how effective they are in the actual game. It's also because the airframe here is absolute dog water, and you really don't get much done with it. The R-73 has incredible range, it's very maneuverable, probably the most agile missile you will find in the game right now that has any semblance of range, so basically only excluding the SRAM, but I'm not sure if the SRAM or the SRAM, whatever you want to call it, would actually be more maneuverable. It's hard to tell, I haven't actually tested it, but in terms of comparing them, this missile is gonna be borderline undodgeable when it comes to actually pulling and actually getting out of the way. Now, if you snap roll perfectly, this missile is actually dodgeable without any flares. Keep in mind, you need to time it perfectly. And again, the missile is kind of gimped right now. I think that these missiles will be fixed in the future. And as they are right now, I think they would be okay on something like the MiG-29. The MiG-29, I've been saying that it doesn't need these missiles, and I still kind of stand behind it. But as they are right now, I'm also not opposed to the MiG-29 having them, because the R-60s just have absolutely no range. But let's look at some gameplay here. F-14 been chasing me. I'm gonna turn around before he gets too close, because now I still get my guns on him, and I just absolutely send this guy to the Shadow Realm. And I then break off again. I am not gonna tangle with a MiG-29 as well as the guy that's behind him. I'm not entirely sure what it is at this point. I just forgot. And I want to stay with my team. So I break off for a little bit. I turn back in. And now we can actually engage these guys together. And it looks like it's an FRS together with a tornado. So we are gonna look up this FRS at long range with an R-73 and see if he does anything. Now this will reach him very easily. However, he dropped a singular flare. And that's all she wrote. We dodge the tornado missile with some flares, we go head on with him, we absolutely blast him out of the air, and then we continue on to the MiG-29. And again, as you can tell, most of my kills are actually with the guns, and that's because R-73s are still infrared missiles. They are very easily dodgeable with flares, as long as you are not in this exact predicament. If you are on a MiG-29, it's very hot, and if you keep the afterburner on, you need to turn the afterburners off and you need to flare. You cannot do one of each. This missile will eat you alive, and it will eat you alive very easily. The R-73 is not a missile you really want to fuck with. It's very, very potent. But if you handle it properly and if you actually think about what you are doing, it remains an IR missile which is completely defeatable as long as you use your head a little bit. And I don't mean for a sloppy toppy, as most of you guys are familiar with. And again, I come in, I shoot an R-73 off, one flare, missile gone. Sure, it's a head-on, sure it's a side-on aspect somewhat, and that should be very easily flareable, but I'm just showing you that in most of the aspects that you will find yourself in, these missiles aren't as game-breaking as you might think. The guns, however, are pretty damn good, and everyone is dumb enough to just fly head-on with us, and just like that we basically get 3 kills in the span of 2 seconds. Provided if this plane actually pulled a little bit harder and I was able to aim. So the FRS kind of flies underneath us, we again dodge one of the missiles, and I just see people ahead of me, and at this point I think I can R-73 him, but I also want to use my R-60, so I think I'm gonna go for him and shoot the other one. The issue is, I'm too slow and I'm too greedy. I should have just shot the R-73 at the MiG-23 over there, and then I actually would have gotten another kill. However, I shoot at the F-16 thinking that I can reel in the MiG-23, get both kills, and I end up with none of them. The kills that are provided to you in this thing, you need to grab it with both hands and you just need to start sucking on it. If you don't do it, if you think to yourself, if I go in this direction, I might get 4 kills instead of only 2, you might just end up with 0 because it takes you too long to really kill anyone, and by the time you get to them, the guy is either dead, or they have killed the guy they are tangled up with and they are running away from you. You don't have the speed, you don't have the presence. You really have no actual way of killing people if your enemies are actually remotely sentient. And as you can see in this video, most people happen to be not even remotely sentient. They are dumber than my hamster. They see an SU-25 and they think to themselves, I have every conceivable advantage, let's go head on with him. Because my only disadvantage is having a little bit less guns and having way less brain cells. So it just ends up into a little bit like this. If you shoot the R-60 MK close enough, they just might end up not flaring because they are too busy actually using their mouse one button to start shooting at you in the head-on, which is already a death sentence for them. But then they also need to press the flare key. It requires a little bit too much thought, and they end up just eating shit and dying right in front of you. And that's the real beauty of this vehicle, but really the only beauty that you will find in this vehicle. It is not very great, it's not worth your time, and you should sell it on the Convergence store if you want to play it in Arabi. Yes, it has R-73s, but that's really the only real selling point of this vehicle, and even then you don't really get to use it that often because your team will kill them before you even get near any enemies. And that's the real issue with this thing. It's just, you're just commuting for 3 minutes to reach the middle of the battle, and the battle takes 5 minutes tops. And about a minute and a half of that, extra minute that you have, guess what that is? That's chasing the last guy that managed to survive, wants to repair, wants to rearm, and goes back to the airfield. It wasn't really fun to fly this thing, other than sitting in a voice chat with a few guys and just yelling things every time I get a kill, but that's really where the fun ends. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.